Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Beatdowns with the Boz. Thank you so much for joining me. So today I have Lucas Blohan's great black-white control deck that he won the most recent Pro Tour. And if you're a fan of Jund in Modern, which I am, this deck has a lot of those same elements. There's just a lot of good creatures, a lot of good removal, and some really great ways to have card advantage. So to kick things off, basically what you're going to be doing with this deck is just essentially ripping apart your opponent's synergies, making it so that their deck can't really function the way it wants to. They're going to have to rely on individual cards playing roles, and a lot of the decks just aren't actually set up to do that. So the way that this deck works is by just having a lot of removal to pick all of your opponent's stuff apart, and even some of its creatures, which end up being threats, like or planeswalkers like Liliana, Ob Nixilis, and Sorin, all end up being removal spells in their own right. Avacyn flipping, it's not going to be too common with this deck that you flip her, but it will come up at times. And, so there's just a lot that this deck does with its permanents. But it's going to start out with a bunch of removal. So you've got Hallowed Moonlights to go well against Collected Company, as well as other sources of token generation. Transgress the Mind, so you can attack your opponent's hand. Certain things you just don't want to resolve. Like Emrakul, for example. You've got Ultimate Prices, Grasp of Darkness, so you can hold off an early rush. Read the Bones is just one of the great ways to grease the gears of your deck, dig deeper into your library. Liliana ends up being a great answer and a threat, in particular when you're up against a deck that has a lot of small creatures. Liliana ends up generating a lot of value. Ruinous Path and Anguished Unmaking are key. They're your one good way to deal with planeswalkers, since you're not going to have much early pressure. And also, Anguished Unmaking can deal with just random stuff like Stasis Snares or flipped Westville Abbeys, and the ilk. To round things out with the removal, you've got a bunch of Languishes. The deck only has 10 2-drops and 10 3-drops, and one of those 3-drops is Read the Bones, so you're going to be able to go like 2-mana removal spell, 3-mana removal spell a fair amount of the time, but you're not going to be able to have that consistently, and having Languish picks up the slack in those draws. And then to basically close the game out, Liliana will play a little bit of a part, but it's really going to be on the backs of cards like Kalitas, Archangel Avacyn, Ob Nixilis, Sorin, and Linvala is just similar to Languish, just the perfect card for catching you up when you're behind. Also, it's just so hard for Bank Company to ever beat this card. It's like insane. In the mana base, we have some Shambling Vents to help buffer our life total, as well as just make our deck a little bit more dense, so that we can have access to more functional cards without having to cast like 6 copies of Read the Bones. And there's also this Blighted Fen hanging out, which I like quite a bit. On the sideboard, you have a bunch of Gideons in case you need to be more aggressive. 4 Languish out, 4 Gideon in is a pretty easy swap whenever you're up against like a ramp deck or something like that. A handful of Duresses, the full 4 copies, 3rd Transgress the Mind, and the Infinite Obliterations are going to make it so that you can fight the ramp decks and other control decks. And then if you do need a little extra removal because your opponent is really fast, got these dead weights, another Ultimate Price, and another Anguished Unmaking to kind of round things out, just so you can deal with basically whatever. So I'm not surprised that this deck did phenomenally well at the Pro Tour. It's just a great deck, a lot of great cards, and I think it's positioned pretty well in the format because it's basically a control deck that can beat up on Band Company, but can also have some great game against the more ramp-orientated Emrakul decks. So anyway, we're going to get some games. It should be sweet. Let's get to it.